This case will disgust you. She was a glamorous heiress, a descendant of Indian aristocracy, and a woman of elegance and strength. But in 1991, she vanished without a trace, only to be found 4 years later, buried alive in her own backyard. This is the chilling story of Shakereh Khaleeli, India's most haunting case of deception, greed, and betrayal. To get a full sense of today's case, let's start at the beginning. Shakereh, who I'll refer to as Shak for the rest of the video, was born in 1947 in the Indian state of Karnataka into one of the country's most prominent families. She was the granddaughter of Sir Mirza Ismail, a celebrated statesman who served as Diwan of Mysore, Jaipur and Hyderabad. Sorry about my pronunciations in this video, hopefully I'm getting them as close as possible. In modern terms, a Diwan was the equivalent of a Prime Minister, a position of immense power and influence. Raised in wealth and privilege, Shak grew up in a world of refinement, education and high society. At the age of 18, Shak married her cousin, Akbar Mirza Khaleeli, a rising officer in the Indian Foreign Service. The couple had 4 daughters together and they lived a life that spanned continents, moving between India and diplomatic postings across the Middle East. Akbar Khaleeli would later become India's ambassador to several countries, including Iran and Australia. His career, though distinguished, often kept him away from home, travelling for long periods due to the demands of foreign service. In 1982, the couple required some help to manage their properties, resulting in contact with a man named Murali Manohar Mishra. During the 1970s or 80s, he reinvented himself as a spiritual guru under the name of Swami Shradhananda. Swami moved into the small portion of the couple's mansion on Richmond Road. Shortly after this encounter, Akbar was assigned to the diplomatic mission in Iran, but because of the Iranian Revolution, Shak didn't accompany him this time. She stayed back with the 4 kids, and what followed was the beginning of a deeply troubling transformation in her life, one that would ultimately lead to her tragic end. Somehow, during this period, Shak found trust in Swami and fell in love with him. So when Akbar Khaleeli returned from his diplomatic posting, she made a bold, controversial decision. In 1985, after 21 years of marriage, she filed for divorce. Her family was so confused. She seemingly had a perfect life, a loving husband and 4 beautiful children. Then the following year, her family were even more baffled when Shak married Swami, her new mysterious love. To those who knew her, this move was shocking. Swami was the complete opposite to her former husband, who was a man of power, status and sophistication. But Swami had something else, a deeply manipulative charm. Shak had always longed for a son, something she had never had. Swami claimed, though, that he possessed spiritual powers that could help her conceive a boy, a promise that may have drawn her deeper into his web. We'll likely never know what truly attracted her to him, but this desire, combined with his persuasion, may have played a role. Her family and friends were baffled. Swami lacked both social standing and education. He came from Sagar, Madhya Pradesh, and had dropped out of school before completing high school. He eventually moved to Delhi, where he found work with a royal family. Not as a nobleman, however, but as an errand boy or an assistant. This gave him some insight into the world of wealth and power, something which he would later exploit. Over time, he transformed into a self-styled fixer, helping with property disputes, legal paperwork and tax issues, often operating in murky legal grey areas. He also began calling himself a god-man. He started dressing in flowing white robes and cultivating a spiritual persona that many believed was nothing more than an act. But behind the white robes and spiritual talk was a man driven by ambition, greed and control. After marrying Swami, Shak's world slowly but unmistakably began to shrink. Swami distanced Shak from friends, family and public life. Invitations were declined, visits grew rare, and even her daughters, who were once an integral part of her life, but now viewed as a threat to Swami's wicked plans, they too were gradually pushed out. Over time, Shak became almost invisible, living in isolation within the confines of her Bangalore bungalow. Behind this change was a calculated effort by Swami to control every aspect of her life. Tragically, Shak trusted her husband, She allowed him access to her money and her properties, and after becoming power of attorney, he manipulated her into transferring significant portions of her wealth into his name. But with time, their marriage began to unravel. They argued often, especially over finances. And eventually, that tension gave way to something darker, a calculated plan to murder his wife. In 1991, by pure chance, Shak bumped into her daughter, Saba, in Delhi. The meeting was warm and emotional, and they promised to stay in touch, and they did, calling each other almost every day. That was until one day, the calls suddenly stopped. Saba tried calling her mum again and again, but every time Swami answered with a new excuse. One day Shak was supposedly attending a wedding, another day she was abroad in London or even the US, or somewhere completely unreachable. Given Shak's wealth and international connections, it all sounded really believable. But Saba's instincts told her something was wrong. When Saba insisted on speaking directly to her mum, Swami produced a lie that was so cruel and calculated. Swami told Saba that her mum was pregnant, and with her longing so badly for a son, Swami told Saba that her mum believed it to be bad luck for them to talk, and they could meet after the baby arrives. This deceit just escalated. He eventually told Saba that her mother was in Roosevelt Hospital in New York, preparing to give birth, but Saba wasn't convinced. She called the hospital herself, only to be told that there was no patient under her name. When she then confronted Swami, he brushed it off, saying he'd purposely given her the wrong location, and that Shak was actually in London, that her mum needed peace, and assured her that they'd be in touch as soon as the baby arrived. But the truth was that this was a grotesque lie, designed to buy him more time. Unable to locate her mum, and now months with no contact, Saba took matters into her own hands. At the time, she was a successful model based in Bombay, but her gut told her to go home. She travelled to her mother's luxury bungalow in Bangalore, and what she found chilled her to her core. She found Shak's passport. If her mother had travelled abroad, as Swami had claimed, why was her passport still in the house? And not just that, there were no stamps inside. No indication that she had gone anywhere at all, like he'd been saying for months. And Swami's demeanour was far too relaxed for her liking. Realising this was far more serious than she feared, Saba filed for a habeas corpus on the 10th of June 1992, 13 months after Shak's disappearance. Police interrogated Swami, but he had no shame. His deception continued. He alleged that Shak had ongoing legal disputes with close relatives, which had drove her to acute depression, and that while he was out of the house one day, she left in anger, leaving no clues as to where she was heading. For months, police tried connecting Swami to the disappearance of his wife, until finally, in May 1994, during a sting operation, Swami would crack under the pressure and confess. Police had approached ex-workers of the family, thinking they must have some insight into what may have happened to Shak, where she may have gone. They pushed alcohol upon the ex-workers, until finally one announced that they last saw Shak asleep in her room. And that same day, Swami asked for a big wooden box to be brought near to their bedroom. Swami had requested for a 7 by 2 foot wooden box to be made, complete with wheels, and he told people that it was just to hold furniture. Meanwhile, they also had a pit dug in the courtyard, which he claimed was for underground tanks. On top of this, Swami removed a portion of their bedroom wall, which led directly into their courtyard. On the morning of the 28th of May 1991, Swami laced Shak's tea with sleeping pills. It was after drinking this tea that the worker had last seen Shak sleeping. Swami then moved Shak, still on the mattress and now in a deep sleep, into his custom-made box. He then nailed it shut and wheeled the box through the hole in the bedroom wall, into the courtyard and into the freshly dug pit. He poured concrete over the top, tiled it with stone slabs, and finally planted a tulsi plant on top, which he watered with milk. Swami then sold his wife's properties as fast as he possibly could, selling 34 plots just 2 days later, and continued a life of luxury, throwing parties and dancing in that very courtyard where his wife laid beneath. For 3 years, Swami maintained his lies. But in March 1994, unable to evade the truth any longer, he led police and a camera crew to the burial site. Police and the camera crew arrived at Shakereh's bungalow on Richmond Road on the 3rd of March 1994 to exhume her remains. Swami took them through their bedroom and into a courtyard enclosed by 4 tall walls, but the sky was still exposed. There, under the tulsi plant, a wooden box was finally dug up, and inside was a mattress, a pillow, a bedsheet, and the skeletal remains of Shakereh Khaleeli. 3 of Shak's rings were identified by her mother, a red stone ring and 2 black rings, and a dressing gown was also identified by Shak's maid. Following Swami's initial confession, he later retracted it in court, claiming that his wife had passed by natural causes. But what investigators uncovered left them deeply disturbed. Scratch marks were found on the inside of the wooden box, and the remains of her hand were found clutching the mattress. This evidence proved what no one wanted to believe. Shakereh had been buried alive by the very man that she trusted with her life. She had woken up in that box, trapped, suffocating, and fully aware of the betrayal. My goodness, I can't even begin to think of how she felt. The very thought has me feeling claustrophobic. Swami's trial began sometime around 1995. In 2005, after a lengthy trial period, likely due to the complexity of the case, he was found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. The court declared he married her purely for her wealth, calling it a man's vile greed, coupled with the devil's cunning. But in 2006, he appealed this decision, resulting in the sentence being changed to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This was in 2008. To this day, he still maintains his innocence, with his defence arguing that the evidence against him is nothing more than circumstantial. I'm sorry, but how do you explain knowing the exact burial site and fabricating lies for years unless you had something to hide? In 2002, at the age of 88, he pleaded for release, but thankfully the court denied his request. Shakereh Khaleeli's brutal and unimaginable death left her family shattered. For years, her daughters lived with unanswered questions, enduring the torment of not knowing where their mother was, or even if she was still alive. The revelation that she had been buried alive by someone that she trusted so deeply only deepened their grief. Her loved ones continue to carry the weight of that trauma, but through truth, remembrance and justice, they hold on to hope that healing is possible. Shak's memory lives on through them, a reminder of her strength, grace and enduring spirit. They remember Shak as charming with a larger-than-life character, a sociable woman with a love of vintage cars and a heart full of warmth. This is everything I have for this case, but let me know, what do you think of Swami's change of sentence? Was he more deserving of the death penalty than never getting out of prison? If you'd like to hear more cases like this one, please remember to subscribe or watch the video currently on your screen. Also, feel free to leave any case suggestions you'd like me to cover.